I had always prided myself on being rational, but the night I rode the last train home, that pride was shattered. It was a chilly October evening, and the train station was eerily deserted. The dim lights flickered sporadically, casting long, jittery shadows on the empty platform. I glanced at my watch. It was past midnight, and the last train was due in 5 minutes. I was the only passenger waiting, my breath forming little clouds in the cold air. The only sound was the occasional rumble of distant trains and the soft hum of the station's failing lights. When the train finally arrived, it was oddly quiet. The doors slid open with a slow, mechanical sigh, and I stepped inside. The interior was just as deserted as the platform, with only a few scattered passengers dotting the seats. I chose a spot near the back and settled in, eager to get home. As the train began its journey, I noticed that the lights inside were dimmer than usual, casting an unsettling yellowish hue over everything. The usual rhythmic clatter of the wheels on the tracks was muted, replaced by an unsettling silence that seemed to press in on me from all sides. I tried to relax, but a creeping sense of unease gnawed at me. I glanced around, noting that the other passengers seemed unusually still, their faces obscured by the shadows. It was then that I noticed something peculiar. Their eyes. They were all staring straight ahead, unblinking, as if in a trance. The train jolted suddenly, and I was thrown slightly off balance. I looked up and saw that the scenery outside had changed. The familiar cityscape had given way to a dense, foggy forest. I tried to brush off the discomfort, attributing it to my tired mind playing tricks on me. Then I saw her. She was sitting across from me, her appearance almost ethereal. A young woman, dressed in an old-fashioned white gown, with long, dark hair cascading over her shoulders. Her eyes were wide and hollow, as if she had seen something that had utterly broken her. Our eyes met, and I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. She seemed to be pleading silently, her eyes locked onto mine with an intense desperation. I wanted to reach out, but my limbs felt like lead. I could only stare, paralyzed. The train began to slow, and I glanced out the window again. The fog had thickened, and I could barely make out the shadowy outlines of the trees. The train came to a halt with an unsettling jolt, and the lights flickered ominously before going out entirely. In the pitch darkness, I heard the shuffling of footsteps. It was a soft, dragging sound, like something being dragged across the floor. My heart pounded in my chest as I strained to see through the darkness. The woman's figure began to move toward me, her steps slow and deliberate. I could hear her soft, broken whispers, but the words were incomprehensible. My panic escalated as I tried to scramble out of my seat, but the darkness seemed to press in on me, making every movement feel like wading through molasses. Then I felt a cold touch on my arm, a hand, ice-cold and skeletal. I turned to face the woman, her face now inches from mine. Her eyes were hollow voids, and her mouth opened in a silent scream. The air around us grew frigid, and I could see my breath misting in front of me. In a final desperate act, I pushed past her and stumbled toward the door. The train was still stopped, the darkness almost suffocating. I fumbled with the door handle, finally wrenching it open and leaping out onto the tracks. The fog enveloped me as I ran, my heart racing. The silence of the forest was oppressive, and the only sound was the pounding of my own footsteps. I didn't stop until I reached the edge of the tracks, my legs shaking with exhaustion. When I looked back, the train was gone. The platform was deserted, and the forest had vanished, replaced by the familiar cityscape. The fog had lifted, and the chill had eased. I never spoke of what happened on that train. The next day, I found out that the last train home had been involved in a tragic accident years ago, and the entire crew and passengers had perished. I've never taken the train at night again, and I avoid the station whenever I can. But sometimes, when I'm alone in the dark, I can still feel that cold touch on my arm and see her hollow, pleading eyes. And I know that some trains are not meant to be ridden, and some journeys should never be taken.